The twin suns of Arinder Prime rose slowly over the colony of Haven Reach, bathing the valley in warm gold and pale blue light. Morning mist drifted across endless green fields while transport ships hummed quietly overhead, carrying workers toward the industrial districts beyond the mountains. From a distance, the colony looked peaceful enough to belong in a dream. White cities sparkled beside rivers of crystal water. Children ran through open parks beneath flowering trees, and the air smelled of fresh rain and growing crops. For the 14 million humans who lived there, Haven Reach was more than a colony. It was proof that humanity finally belonged among the stars. 300 years earlier, humans had barely escaped their own solar system. The older races of the galaxy had mocked them from the beginning. They called humans primitive, emotional, violent, reckless. The great galactic powers tolerated humanity's existence, but never truly accepted them. Human diplomats were ignored in the Concord chambers. Human merchants were overcharged at alien ports. Human colonies were pushed toward the dangerous edges of explored space. And still humanity spread, world after world, moon after moon, system after system, because humans were stubborn creatures. Give them poisoned air, and they would build filters. Give them frozen wastelands, and they would build heated cities beneath the ice. Give them hostile oceans, deadly gravity, or violent storms, and somehow they would survive anyway. Haven Reach had once been considered impossible to colonize. The planet's unstable magnetic field disrupted most alien technology. Violent electrical storms swept across the northern continents every month. Even the soil carried microorganisms toxic to several galactic species. The Concord had dismissed the world as worthless. Humans called it home. Elena Reyes stood on the balcony of her apartment overlooking the city while fastening the collar of her engineering uniform. Below her, thousands of people filled the streets as the colony awakened to another ordinary morning. Vendors opened food stalls beside the transit rails. Cargo drones floated between skyscrapers. Somewhere in the distance, music echoed from an early street festival beginning near the River District. Inside the apartment, a small voice called out, "Mom, you promised you'd walk me to school today." Elena smiled despite herself. 2 minutes, Sophia. You said that 10 minutes ago. Elena shook her head softly. 7-year-old Sophia Reyes possessed a rare ability to sound both adorable and offended at the same time. Elena grabbed her jacket from a kitchen chair and turned toward the living room where her daughter stood impatiently beside the door with a backpack almost larger than she was. Sophia crossed her arms dramatically. "You're late." "I'm exactly on time." "You said adults should never be late." "I also said adults pay taxes and work 16-hour shifts." Sophia narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "That sounds fake." Elena laughed for the first time in days. Outside, another transport ship thundered across the sky, its engines vibrating faintly through the apartment walls. Sophia immediately ran toward the window. "Look," she shouted excitedly. "The big cargo ships are back." Elena stepped beside her daughter and looked upward. Massive freighters descended slowly through the upper atmosphere, their hulls reflecting the morning sunlight like floating mountains of silver steel. Sophia pressed her hands against the glass. "One day I'm going to fly one. You said last week you wanted to be a scientist. I changed my mind." "That quickly?" Sophia nodded seriously. "I want to see every planet." Elena stared at her daughter quietly for a moment. That was the thing about children born among the stars. They dreamed differently. Earth was just a distant history lesson to them. Their universe was bigger, wilder, infinite, and maybe that was why humanity frightened the older species so much. Humans adapted too fast, dreamed too big, expanded too far. The Concord claimed Haven Reach violated territorial agreements near the outer sectors, though no species had ever settled the region before humanity arrived. Officially, negotiations were still ongoing. Unofficially, everyone knew several alien powers wanted humans gone from the system entirely. But politics felt very far away on mornings like this. On mornings like this, Haven Reach felt untouchable. As Elena and Sophia walked the crowded streets toward the education district, life unfolded around them in warm, familiar rhythms. Street performers entertained crowds near the river bridges. Market vendors shouted advertisements across crowded plazas. Students rushed toward schools while workers packed transit stations beneath glowing holographic schedules. Ordinary life, safe life, human life. Sophia suddenly tugged on Elena's sleeve and pointed toward the sky. "Mom!" Elena looked up automatically. At first, she saw nothing unusual, just clouds drifting high above the city. Then the sunlight disappeared. The shadows spread across the street slowly at first, like thunderheads rolling across the heavens. Conversations around them began to fade. People stopped walking. One by one, heads tilted upward toward the sky. Elena felt her stomach tighten. The clouds were moving too perfectly, too evenly. And then she realized they were not clouds at all. Ships. Hundreds of them. No, thousands. Massive black warships emerged silently through the atmosphere, blotting out the twin suns like an iron curtain descending over the world. Their hulls were dark green and jagged, covered in glowing symbols that burned like fire against metal. A mother nearby grabbed her child instinctively. Someone whispered in terror. "No!" Another voice answered. "It can't be." But Elena already knew. Every human in the galaxy knew that symbol. The serpent crest of the Dravari Dominion, one of the oldest and cruelest military empires in known space. All across Haven Reach, emergency alarms suddenly erupted from towers and buildings in deafening waves. The city froze, and high above the colony, the warships continued descending. The alarms did not stop. Their shrill mechanical screams echoed across Haven Reach like the cries of some dying machine, while panic spread through the streets below. Traffic halted instantly. Civilian transports collided above. The city, as frightened pilots tried to reverse direction at the same time. Crowds surged through intersections in blind confusion. Parents grabbing children, workers abandoning vehicles, strangers shouting contradictory orders at one another. And above it all, the Dravari fleet continued its descent. The warships were enormous. Elena had seen military vessels before. Every human had. Border skirmishes between minor species were common near the outer sectors. But these ships were different. Ancient, heavy, built not for defense, but domination. Their armored hulls stretched across the sky like floating continents, layer after layer of black metal covered in glowing weapon arrays. Sophia clutched Elena's hand tightly. "Mom." Elena forced herself to stay calm. "It's okay," she lied instantly. "We just need to get inside." But even as she said it, she knew something was wrong. No emergency defense grid activated. No planetary shields. No military response. Nothing. The colony's orbital cannons remained silent while the enemy fleet settled into position directly above the atmosphere like predators circling wounded prey. Then every screen in the city flickered. Public billboards, transit monitors, personal communicators. Every display changed simultaneously. A symbol appeared first, the Dravari serpent crest. Then a face replaced it. Gasps spread to the crowd around Elena. The alien staring back at them looked almost reptilian. Dark-scaled skin covered his long, narrow face, interrupted by thin scars running from his jawline to his forehead. His yellow eyes were cold and ancient, completely empty of compassion or hesitation. Gold armor rested across his shoulders beneath a black military cloak marked with Dominion insignias. When he spoke, his voice rolled through the city from millions of speakers. Calm, controlled, almost bored. Humans of Haven Reach. The streets became silent. "I am High Commander Verith of the Dravari Dominion." He paused slightly, studying the camera as if examining insects. "For 32 cycles, your species has ignored Dominion warnings regarding this territory. You were ordered to withdraw. You refused." Another pause. "You were told your expansion threatened the balance of civilized space. You ignored us." His expression hardened slightly. "So today we correct the mistake." A man somewhere in the crowd shouted angrily, "This is illegal." Others joined him immediately. "You can't do this. The Concord will intervene." "Elena?" Sophia's voice trembled now. Elena squeezed her daughter's hand harder, without taking her eyes off the screen, because Commander Verith was smiling. Not warmly, not proudly, cruelly. "The Concord has already been informed. he said softly. "No intervention is coming." The silence afterward felt worse than the alarms. People stared upward in disbelief. No help? No resistance? Impossible. Humanity had treaties, agreements, trade alliances. Even hostile species usually followed diplomatic protocols. Entire worlds were not simply attacked without consequence. But deep down, Elena felt the truth settling into her stomach like ice. The Dravari would not have come unless they knew nobody would stop them. Suddenly, another voice crackled through the emergency channels. "Attention, citizens! This is Governor Elias Ward. Remain calm and proceed to designated shelters immediately. Colonial Defense Forces are attempting to restore communications." The transmission cut violently into static. Then screaming erupted overhead. Dropships, dozens of them. No, hundreds. Dark armor carriers pierced through the clouds, descending rapidly toward the city in organized attack formations. Their engines howled like monsters as they flew between skyscrapers and over crowded streets. People ran. Pure chaos exploded across Haven Reach. Sophia cried out as Elena pulled her into a side alley, while civilians flooded around them in terrified waves. Somewhere nearby, gunfire erupted suddenly. Bright green plasma bolts tore through the upper levels of a transport station, sending burning debris crashing into the streets below. The first Dravari soldiers had landed. Elena turned the corner hard and nearly collided with a man carrying a bleeding child in his arms. Behind him, smoke poured upward from the financial district, while emergency sirens wailed without pause. "Shelters are full," someone screamed. "They're shooting everyone." They hit the hospital. Another explosion shook the ground violently. Sophia stumbled. Elena caught her instantly. "Mom, I'm scared." "I know. We need Dad." Elena's chest tightened painfully. Daniel. He was still working the orbital maintenance platforms outside the city. If the fleet attacked the stations first... No, don't think about that. Keep moving. Another public screen flickered alive above the street. Commander Verith appeared again. Behind him now, burning human buildings filled the background. "This operation is being broadcast across all Concord systems," he announced calmly. "Let every species observe what happens to those who challenge the Dominion." Elena froze. Broadcast? Her blood ran cold. This was not just an invasion. It was theater. The Dravari wanted witnesses. They wanted the galaxy to watch humanity suffer. Gunfire echoed again nearby, much closer this time. Civilians screamed as armored Dravari troops marched into the avenue ahead, firing plasma rifles methodically into fleeing crowds. Not soldiers. Civilians. Men, women, children. One of the aliens raised his weapon toward a group hiding behind an overturned transport vehicle. Elena saw a little boy among them, about Sophia's age. The plasma blast vaporized all of them instantly. Sophia screamed. Elena grabbed her daughter and ran. Behind them, the city of Haven Reach began to burn. Haven Reach died slowly. That was the worst part. Not in a single explosion. Not in one overwhelming strike. The Dravari wanted suffering, and suffering took time. Smoke rolled across the skyline while entire districts burned beneath orbital bombardment. Emergency sirens screamed continuously through the city, sometimes fading only because the towers broadcasting them had been destroyed. Transport rails collapsed. Hospitals overflowed with wounded civilians until the hospitals themselves became targets. Fires spread block by block, while millions tried desperately to flee towards shelters that no longer existed. And everywhere, cameras watched. The Galaxy watched mothers carrying dead children through burning streets. The Galaxy watched civilians executed beside collapsed buildings. The Galaxy watched humanity bleed. Inside the underground transit tunnels beneath Sector 12, Elena huddled with Sophia and nearly 40 other survivors. The tunnel station had once been crowded with travelers, moving between districts. Now it had become a refugee shelter filled with terrified civilians packed shoulder to shoulder beneath flickering emergency lights. Children cried softly in corners. A wounded man groaned nearby, while his wife pressed torn fabric against the hole burned through his chest. Nobody spoke loudly anymore. Fear had drained the station into silence. Sophia sat curled tightly against Elena's side, trembling violently every time explosions shook dust from the ceiling overhead. "Mom!" Elena looked down immediately. "What is it? Are we going to die?" The question nearly broke her. For a moment, Elena could not answer, because she did not know. Outside the tunnels, the Dravari controlled the city completely now. Human security forces had collapsed within the first hour. Communications were gone. Power grids were failing sector by sector, orbitally. The enemy fleet hung over the colony untouched like executioners watching an operation already completed. And still the broadcast continued. A damaged public monitor mounted near the tunnel entrance flickered back to life suddenly. Several survivors looked away instantly. Others stared helplessly. Commander Verith appeared once more. This time, he stood inside what looked like a human school. Bodies covered the floor behind him. Small bodies. Elena heard someone nearby begin quietly sobbing. "The humans continue resisting Dominion correction," Verith announced calmly. "Observe the consequences of such irrational behavior." The camera turned. Dravari soldiers marched frightened children from classrooms into the open courtyard outside. Some of them were crying. Some screamed for parents who would never come. One little girl clutched a stuffed animal so tightly her hands shook. Sophia buried her face against Elena immediately. But Elena could not stop watching, could not breathe, because the soldiers lined the children against the wall and raised their rifles. The executions were broadcast live across the galaxy, across thousands of worlds, across millions of screens. The shots echoed to the tunnel station speakers with horrifying clarity. Somewhere behind Elena, a man screamed in rage and threw a metal chair into the wall hard enough to bend it. Another survivor collapsed to his knees, while others covered their faces in horror. Commander Verith returned to the screen. "The Dravari Dominion has ruled civilized space for 11,000 years, he said calmly. "Species survive by understanding hierarchy. Humanity forgot its place." He smiled slightly. "So, today we remind them." The transmission ended. Nobody in the tunnel moved. The silence afterward felt unnatural, like something sacred had just died. Then the station lights suddenly flickered red. Motion detected above. Several civilians panicked immediately. "No! They found us!" "Please, no." Heavy impacts echoed to the tunnel ceiling overhead. Boom, 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 like giant footsteps. The Dravari were searching the underground sectors now. Elena's heart hammered violently. Sophia clung to her so tightly it hurt. A former security officer near the station entrance checked the charge on his small pistol with shaking hands. "We stay quiet," he whispered. "Maybe they pass over us." Another impact, closer this time. Dust rained from the ceiling. Then came the sound that froze everyone completely. Metal scraping against metal. The access doors above the tunnel. Someone was cutting through them. Panic spread instantly. People backed deeper into the station, while children cried openly now. One woman prayed under her breath. Another hugged both her sons against her chest, as though she could physically shield them from what was coming. The cutting stopped. For one horrible second, absolute silence filled the tunnel. Then the blast doors exploded inward. Smoke flooded the station entrance. Dravari soldiers emerged through the haze like demons. Tall, armored, emotionless. Their glowing rifles swept across the terrified civilians. One survivor screamed and ran. A plasma shot tore him apart instantly. The security officer fired twice before green bolts vaporized half his body. Chaos erupted. People scattered in every direction while Dravari troops advanced methodically through the station, firing into the crowd with mechanical precision. Elena grabbed Sophia and ran toward the maintenance corridors at the rear of the platform, while screams echoed behind them. A child cried out nearby. A mother begged for mercy. Gunfire answered her. Sophia stumbled suddenly. Elena turned and saw a Dravari soldier directly ahead blocking the corridor. The alien slowly raised his rifle toward them. For one frozen moment, the world stopped. Sophia screamed. Elena pulled her daughter behind herself, instinctively despite knowing it was useless. The soldier stared at them silently, then tilted his head slightly, almost curious. His rifle remained aimed directly at Sophia. And then his communicator crackled. A distorted voice spoke in the Dravari language. The soldier glanced sideways briefly toward the transmission. That tiny distraction saved them. A wounded civilian farther down the corridor lunged desperately into the alien's legs with a scream of pure rage. The plasma shot fired wildly into the ceiling as both crashed sideways. "Run!" the man screamed. Elena did. She grabbed Sophia and sprinted deeper into the maintenance tunnels while gunfire exploded behind them. The last thing she heard before turning the corner was the sound of the wounded man screaming as the Dravari tore him apart. Above Haven Reach, the fires continued burning, and across the galaxy, billions watched humanity die live on their screens. More than 40,000 light-years away from Haven Reach, the grand Concord chamber stood in absolute silence. The chamber was enormous, built at the center of the galactic capital world of Ethon Prime. Towers of silver metal stretched upward into darkness, while holographic stars drifted slowly beneath the transparent dome overhead. Representatives from 52 species filled the circular assembly, each seated beneath the banners of their civilizations. And every one of them was watching the massacre. Massive projection screens displayed live footage from Haven Reach across the chamber walls. Burning cities, human bodies in the streets, children crying beside dead parents, Dravari soldiers executing civilians methodically, while Commander Verith narrated the slaughter with cold amusement. Nobody looked comfortable anymore, not even the species that hated humanity. Representative Solvek of the Trine Collective leaned forward angrily from his platform. "This has gone far enough," he snapped. "The Dominion was authorized to remove the colony, not exterminate civilians." Across the chamber, the Dravari ambassador barely reacted. Ambassador Krell folded his clawed hands calmly. "The Dominion is restoring order within its sovereign territory." "By murdering children?" another delegate demanded. Krell's yellow eyes narrowed slightly. "Human offspring eventually become human adults." Murmurs spread uneasily through the chamber. At the center platform, High Chancellor Meroving closed his eyes briefly in frustration. The ancient Talvex leader had governed the Concord for nearly 80 years, and never once had he seen tensions spiral this quickly. "We are drifting toward catastrophe," he warned carefully. "Humanity will not ignore this." A harsh clicking sound echoed from the Drake area delegation. Their representative laughed. "Humanity?" Representative Zorith sneered. "They are insignificant primitives with delusions of importance. The Dominion is merely correcting an infestation." Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded quietly in agreement. That was the ugly truth beneath the Concord's polished diplomacy. Many species feared humanity. Humans spread too quickly, adapted too aggressively, survived too easily. In only 3 centuries, humanity had expanded faster than civilizations thousands of years older. Human colonies appeared everywhere. Harsh worlds, unstable systems, disputed sectors nobody else wanted. And wherever humans settled, they thrived. That frightened the old powers more than they admitted publicly. On the massive projection screen, Commander Verith appeared once again beside burning human buildings. "Observe carefully," he announced to the galaxy. "This is the fate of species that mistake tolerance for weakness." The footage shifted suddenly. A Dravari firing line executed kneeling human civilians in groups of 20. Some delegates looked away immediately. Others continued watching. Representative Zorith smiled. "The lesson is effective." Chancellor Merovin slammed one hand against his platform. "Enough!" The chamber fell silent instantly. The elderly Talvex leader rose slowly to his feet. "This assembly was created to preserve civilization," he said sharply, "not endorse barbarism." The Dravari ambassador tilted his head slightly. "Will the Concord intervene?" Nobody answered immediately, because everyone knew the truth. Intervention meant war with the Dravari Dominion. And despite humanity's growing influence, no species present believed humans were worth that cost. The silence itself became the answer. Meanwhile, on Earth, millions watched the same broadcast with horror. Cities stopped functioning. Factories shut down. Traffic disappeared from roads as entire populations gathered around public screens, showing the destruction of Haven Reach in real time. People cried openly in crowded streets. Others stared silently with expressions too shocked for grief. And beneath the horror, something else was growing. Anger. Pure, unbearable anger. Inside the United Human Assembly in Geneva, representatives argued furiously, while emergency alerts filled every monitor across the chamber. We have to send the fleet now. It's too far. We can't reach them in time. Then hit the Dominion directly. We are not prepared for total war. At the rear of the chamber, Admiral Naomi Tanaka stood perfectly still while the arguments continued around her. She had not spoken once during the entire emergency session. She simply watched the screens, watched Haven Reach burn, watched children die, watched the galaxy do nothing. A young officer approached her carefully. "Admiral," no response. "Admiral Tanaka?" Finally, she looked at him. The officer hesitated. "Our final evacuation ships were destroyed 30 minutes ago." Tanaka closed her eyes briefly. "How many escaped?" "Approximately 12,000. 12,000 out of 14 million. The officer swallowed hard before continuing. "There's something else." Tanaka said nothing. The Concord has officially declined military intervention. For a long moment, she did not react. Then she looked back toward the burning colony on the screens. Entire districts were gone now. The casualty counter climbing across the emergency feed had surpassed 8 million dead. Still rising. The officer lowered his voice. "Admiral, what do we do?" That question echoed through the chamber. Representatives stopped arguing. Everyone turned toward her, because despite political divisions, despite bureaucracy and debate, every person in that room knew one truth. If humanity went to war now, Naomi Tanaka would lead it. The elderly admiral stared silently at the screens for several more seconds. Then a new image appeared across the broadcast. Governor Elias Ward, alive somehow. The human governor knelt in chains before Commander Verith amid the ruins of Haven Reach's capital district. Blood covered half his face. Behind him, the colony burned beneath black skies filled with Dominion warships. Verith smiled toward the camera. "Governor Ward wishes to address humanity one final time." The chamber became silent. Ward lifted his head slowly. He looked exhausted, broken, but his eyes still burned. "You wanted humanity afraid," he said quietly. Verith smiled wider. "Yes." "You wanted the galaxy to watch us die." "Yes." Ward coughed blood onto the ground before continuing. "Then you made the biggest mistake in your species' history." The smile faded slightly from Verith's face. Ward looked directly into the camera, into every human home, every human city, every human world. "You could have killed us quietly," he whispered. "Instead, you humiliated us." Silence filled the chamber. Ward slowly forced himself back to his feet, despite the chains. "You made every human child watch this." His voice grew stronger. "You made every parent imagine their own family burning in these streets." Verith's expression hardened. "You think anger matters?" the Dravari commander asked coldly. "Your species is weak." Ward smiled, a terrible smile. "No," he said softly. "But now we have something far more dangerous than strength." He looked directly into the camera one last time. "We have nothing left to lose." The chamber froze. Even Verith stopped moving. Ward's voice dropped almost to a whisper. "You awakened something in humanity today." Then he pointed directly toward the camera. "And when it comes for you," his smile widened. "Remember this moment." The broadcast ended with a gunshot. Absolute silence consumed the United Human Assembly. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Admiral Naomi Tanaka stared at the black screen for a very long time. Then slowly, very slowly, she stood up. The galaxy expected humanity to scream. The Dravari expected furious speeches, desperate threats, emotional declarations of vengeance broadcast across every communication network in civilized space. The Concord prepared emergency negotiations. Border fleets were mobilized. Analysts predicted riots, rebellion, maybe even civil collapse inside human territory. Instead, humanity disappeared. 3 days after the fall of Haven Reach, Every human ambassador withdrew from Concord space without explanation. Diplomatic stations closed overnight. Trade routes vanished. Colonial transmissions stopped completely. Human merchant fleets abandoned major shipping lanes. Entire systems went dark. No speeches. No demands. No retaliation. Nothing. It was as though humanity had simply gone silent. At first, the galaxy interpreted the silence as weakness. News networks across alien space called the humans broken. Commentators claimed the massacre had shattered humanity psychologically. Several species openly mocked the idea that humans had ever been a serious power. The Dravari celebrated openly. Commander Vareth returned to the Dominion capital as a conquering hero. Massive parades filled the streets of Drakkar Prime, while billions cheered his victory. Giant holograms replayed scenes from the Haven Reach massacre above crowded cities, like entertainment broadcasts. Human civilians running through fire. Human children crying. Human leaders begging. The Dominion loved every second of it. Varys stood atop the Imperial Palace balcony overlooking endless crowds below, while reporters surrounded him. "The humans are finished," one journalist declared proudly. "Would you agree the operation restored proper galactic order?" Varys smiled calmly. Humanity has finally learned fear. The crowd roared with approval. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, most species moved on quickly. The massacre became political background noise within weeks. Trade resumed. Markets stabilized. New conflicts emerged elsewhere. Haven Reach faded into another tragic event in galactic history. But on Earth was changing. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, 12 kilometers below solid rock and steel, the doors of Strategic Command Facility Blackstone opened for the first time in 22 years. Admiral Naomi Tanaka walked through the underground complex without speaking while military officers snapped instantly to attention around her. Massive holographic displays covered the walls of the central command chamber, each one tracking different sectors of human space. Every screen showed the same thing: mobilization, shipyards, factories, weapons production. The entire human civilization was transforming. General Marcus Hale approached quickly from the operations platform. "All fleet groups have returned to secure territory," he reported immediately. "Colonial defenses are entering blackout protocol. Phase 1 production schedules are active across all major systems." Tanaka nodded once. "Casualty reports?" Hale hesitated. "Final confirmed estimate from Haven Reach is 13.8 million dead." The room fell silent. Even now, hearing the number aloud felt unreal. 14 million people. Gone. Tanaka stared at the holographic casualty display for several seconds before speaking quietly. The Concord response? Minimal condemnation statements. No sanctions against the Dominion. No military action. Of course not. Human lives had never mattered to the Concord. Not truly. Another officer turned from his station. "The civilian networks are demanding retaliation, Admiral." Tanaka finally looked up. "How severe?" The officer swallowed hard. "Global." And he was right. Across Earth and every surviving human colony, grief had evolved into something colder, something harder. Crowds gathered daily in silence beneath giant public memorials listing the dead of Haven Reach. Families placed flowers beneath holographic images of missing children. Entire cities shut down for remembrance ceremonies broadcast across human space. But there were no peace protests, no anti-war demonstrations, no calls for restraint. Only silence, cold silence, because every human had watched the broadcasts. Every human had seen children executed alive while the galaxy laughed. And now humanity wanted blood. General Hale activated another holographic display. It showed shipyard construction schedules across Mars, Europa, Titan, Luna, and 23 classified military sectors. "We can triple current fleet production within 8 months, he said carefully. "Possibly more civilian industry is nationalized." "Do it." Several officers exchanged glances. No hesitation. No debate. Tanaka continued walking slowly through Command Center while additional reports appeared around her. Weapons research, orbital defenses, prototype fleet designs, Black-budget military projects long prohibited under Concord law. Everything was accelerating now. Humanity was preparing for war, not defensive war, extermination. One of the younger officers finally spoke carefully. "Admiral, are we officially authorizing retaliation?" Tanaka stopped walking. The entire command center became silent instantly. She turned slowly toward the massive holographic projection of Dravari space floating above the chamber. 47 inhabited worlds, nearly 30 billion citizens, one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then finally, "No." Confused silence spread across the room. Tanaka's eyes never left the hologram. "Retaliation implies balance," she said quietly. "Retaliation implies proportional response." Her voice hardened. What happened at Haven Reach was not war. The hologram shifted suddenly. Footage from a massacre appeared again across the chamber walls. Children running through burning streets. Families executed publicly. Commander Vera smiling beside piles of bodies. Several officers looked away instinctively. Tanaka did not. "They wanted humanity afraid," she whispered. Then she looked directly at the officers surrounding her. "So we are going to teach the galaxy fear instead." The room fell completely silent. No one interrupted her now. No one questioned where this was heading. Because deep down, they already knew. Tanaka stepped toward the central command platform. "From this moment forward," she announced calmly, "all human military, industrial, scientific, and economic resources are placed under emergency unification authority." One officer stared at her carefully. "That would effectively place humanity on total war footing." "Yes." Another hesitated. "The Concord will view that as preparation for aggression." Tanaka's expression remained emotionless. The Concord watched our children burn. Nobody spoke after that, because there was nothing left to say. Tanaka looked once more toward the projection of Dravari space. Then, quietly, almost gently, she gave the order that would change galactic history forever. "Begin Phase 1. Across human space, hidden shipyards awakened in darkness. Factories shifted from civilian production to military output overnight. Research laboratories sealed themselves under classified authority. Entire fleets vanished into restricted sectors, while black-budget construction platforms powered online for the first time in decades. And beyond human territory, the galaxy continued believing humanity was broken. That was exactly what Tanaka wanted. Because while the galaxy celebrated, humanity was becoming something terrifying. For the next 11 months, humanity prepared for extinction war. Not survival, not defense, extermination. Deep inside the hidden shipyards orbiting Jupiter, thousands of construction drones worked without pause beneath oceans of steel and fire. Entire fleets took shape inside hollowed asteroids converted into secret manufacturing worlds. Massive warships longer than cities emerged slowly from armored dry docks, while plasma furnaces burned day and night across the solar system. Humanity had stopped building for peace. Now it built only weapons. On Mars, civilian factories that once produced atmospheric processors and farming equipment now manufactured rail cannons, antimatter warheads, and orbital strike systems. Universities shut down entire academic departments and redirected every major scientific institution toward military research. Medical laboratories designed biochemical agents instead of curers. AI networks previously restricted by Concord law were quietly activated beneath military oversight. The transformation spread everywhere. Cold, efficient, absolute, and still, humanity remained silent. No threats were broadcast. No declarations of war were issued. From outside human space, everything looked defensive, fearful, isolated. But inside the hidden command centers beneath Earth, the truth was far darker. Admiral Naomi Tanaka stood before the War Council inside Strategic Command Blackstone, while holographic fleet projections rotated slowly above the chamber. The room itself felt less like a government facility now, and more like the nerve center of some sleeping predator. Officers moved continuously between tactical stations, while classified updates streamed across hundreds of suspended displays. General Hale activated the newest production report. Current fleet strength exceeds original projections, he announced carefully. As of this morning, the Black Fleet consists of 3,800 active warships. Several officers exchanged stunned looks despite hearing similar numbers for months, because humanity had never possessed military power on this scale before. Not even close. The hologram shifted again. New ship classes appeared across the projection. Massive carrier groups, stealth cruisers, planetary siege vessels, experimental subspace attack platforms. Weapons of Concord had banned centuries earlier. Tanaka studied them silently. Combat readiness? 94%. And the Revenant divisions? General Hale hesitated slightly before answering. Fully operational. The chamber darkened. Another hologram activated automatically. Millions of human soldiers appeared across the display. Training footage. Urban warfare simulations. Zero-gravity combat drills. Execution exercises. None of them looked like ordinary troops anymore. The Revenants were volunteers. Every single one had lost family at Haven Reach. Parents, children, brothers, sisters. Entire bloodlines erased in one afternoon. Now they trained with terrifying intensity. Not because they expected survival, because they no longer cared about survival. One training video showed a Revenant unit fighting through live-fire combat simulations while casualties mounted around them. Wounded soldiers continued advancing despite catastrophic injuries. One man lost an arm and still completed the assault objective before collapsing from blood loss. Another officer spoke quietly. Psychological evaluations indicate increasing emotional detachment across all active combat personnel. Tanaka finally looked up, meaning the officer swallowed hard. They no longer view the Dravari as people. Silence. Then another voice joined carefully. Admiral. Some of the training methods being used. He hesitated. They violate every military ethics treaty humanity ever signed. Tanaka's expression never changed. So did Haven Reach? No one argued, because every person in that room had watched the broadcasts. Every one of them still dreamed about burning schools. General Hale activated another classified file. This is Project Eclipse. The hologram shifted again. Several officers visibly tensed. Even among humanity's highest command structure, Eclipse remained heavily restricted. A black sphere appeared rotating slowly above the chamber. At first it looked simple. Then the scale indicators appeared. Planetary scale. One younger officer frowned. What exactly am I looking at? Hale answered quietly. A gravitational destabilization weapon. The room went still. Another officer stared at the projection in disbelief. That's impossible. No, Hale replied softly. It's illegal. He expanded the simulation. A digital planet appeared beside the black sphere, then collapsed inward violently. Continents shattered. Atmosphere ignited. Oceans evaporated. The entire world died in seconds. Silence consumed the chamber. Even veteran officers looked disturbed now. Tanaka continued watching emotionlessly. How many? 3 operational prototypes. Production timeline? 2 additional units every month. One of the admirals finally spoke. Naomi, the use of her first name inside the chamber was rare. Do we really intend to use these? Tanaka turned toward him slowly. Her eyes looked exhausted now. Older somehow. We watched children burn alive, she said quietly, and the galaxy applauded. The Admiral lowered his gaze, because there was no answer to that. Across the chamber, another holographic display activated automatically. This one showed biological research facilities beneath Luna's southern crater systems. Dr. Evelyn Sato appeared through live transmission. Her face looked pale from exhaustion. The shadow virus is complete, she reported carefully. Several officers shifted uncomfortably. Even saying the name aloud felt dangerous. Tanaka remained silent. Sato continued. It targets Dravari respiratory genetics specifically. Mortality rate is effectively 100%. How quickly? Entire planetary populations collapse within 6 to 8 days. And cross-species contamination? Minimal. The room felt colder suddenly. Sato looked physically sick, continuing the report. There is no cure. Silence. Finally, General Hale spoke quietly. My God! Dr. Sato closed her eyes briefly. I became a physician to save lives. Tanaka looked directly at her hologram. And now... Sato opened her eyes again. Now they looked empty. Now I'm helping design extinction. No one spoke after that, because the truth hanging over the chamber was becoming impossible to ignore. Humanity was no longer preparing for war. Humanity was preparing genocide. And somewhere deep beneath the grief, beneath the rage, beneath the endless memories of Haven Reach, something inside the species itself had started changing. The old humanity, hopeful, ambitious, desperate for acceptance among the stars, was dying. In its place, something colder was emerging, something patient, something terrifying. Later that night, Admiral Tanaka stood alone inside the memorial chamber beneath Blackstone Command. The room contained only one thing: names. 14 million names projected endlessly across dark walls of black stone. The dead of Haven Reach. Children, teachers, families, entire generations erased. Tanaka walked slowly through the holographic light until she found one name among the endless list: Yuki Tanaka, age 7. For a long moment, she simply stared at it. Then quietly, almost too softly to hear, she spoke to the darkness. I tried to believe this galaxy could become better. Her voice cracked slightly, but they taught us something instead. She looked back toward the endless stars projected across the memorial ceiling. They taught us fear works. Silence answered her, and somewhere beyond human space, the Dravari Dominion continued celebrating its victory, completely unaware that humanity was no longer preparing to survive. Humanity was preparing to become the thing nightmares feared. 11 months and 26 days after the fall of Haven Reach, the silence ended. Commander Verith awoke to screaming alarms. At first, he thought he was dreaming. The emergency sirens echoed violently through the upper towers of the Imperial Palace, while distant explosions shook the city beneath him. Outside his massive bedroom windows, the night sky above Drakkar Prime burned red. Not metaphorically, literally. Orbital defense stations were exploding. Verith rushed toward the balcony just as another detonation lit the heavens like a newborn star. Fragments of burning metal rained downward through the atmosphere, while emergency craft fled in every direction across the capital skyline. His communicator activated instantly. "Commander!" a panicked voice shouted. "Unknown vessels have breached the outer defense perimeter." Verith froze. Impossible. The Dominion controlled the most heavily fortified systems in the sector. No fleet could penetrate our border networks unnoticed. They didn't come through the borders. Another explosion thundered across the city. They appeared inside the system. Verith's blood turned cold. Subspace insertion? At this scale? Impossible. No species possessed navigation precision advanced enough for deep system fleet insertion. No species except... The communicator crackled again. "Commander..." The officer's voice shook now. "It's the humans." Silence. Absolute silence. For one frozen heartbeat, Verith could not move. Humans? No. Humanity was broken. Terrified. Weak. That was the entire point of Haven Reach. Another explosion tore across orbit. Verith looked upward just as the first human warships emerged from subspace above the planet, and his entire world changed. The ships were enormous, black, angular, built like weapons instead of vessels. Thousands of them unfolded across orbit in perfect silence, while Dominion defense fleets scrambled desperately to respond. Their hulls carried no diplomatic markings, no Concord identifiers, no fleet insignias beyond one single symbol painted across every ship, a white handprint, the memorial mark of Haven Reach. Then the human fleet opened fire. The orbital defense network died in 4 minutes. Across Drakkar Prime, citizens watched in horror as entire military stations vanished from Orbit 1 after another. Human rail cannons punched through Dominion shields effortlessly, vaporizing warships before their crews even understood what was happening. The Dominion fleets tried to regroup, tried to organize, tried to fight. But human ships moved impossibly fast. They appeared from darkness, struck with overwhelming force. then vanish back into subspace before return fire could track them. Entire Dominion squadrons disappeared within seconds beneath coordinated human bombardment. This was not war. This was execution. Far above the battlefield, Admiral Naomi Tanaka stood on the bridge of the human flagship Remembrance while holographic tactical projections flooded the command deck. The bridge remained almost perfectly silent. No cheering, no celebration, only cold efficiency. Tactical update. Tanaka ordered calmly. An officer answered immediately. Primary orbital defenses neutralized. Dominion response fleets collapsing across all sectors. Current enemy casualty projections exceed 400,000. Tanaka nodded once. No reaction. Another officer turned sharply from his station. Admiral, Dravari civilian communication networks are requesting immediate ceasefire negotiations. No response. Yes, Admiral. Outside the massive bridge windows, another Dominion carrier exploded silently beneath concentrated rail fire. The shockwave illuminated dozens of black human warships advancing deeper into orbit like predators entering wounded territory. General Hale stepped beside Tanaka quietly. The Dominion never prepared for a total war retaliation. No, Tanaka replied softly. They prepared for frightened survivors. Below them, Drakkar Prime burned. The capital city descended into chaos while millions fled through collapsing streets beneath raining debris from orbit. Emergency broadcasts filled public channels with desperate evacuation orders. Dominion leaders screamed contradictory commands across failing military frequencies. And still the human fleet advanced. Cold, silent, relentless. A communications officer suddenly looked up. Admiral, Concord emergency networks are requesting direct contact. Patch them through. A holographic transmission appeared instantly above the bridge. The Grand Concord Chamber. Chaos filled the massive assembly. Representatives shouted over one another while emergency alerts flashed across every display behind them. Chancellor Mervyn himself stepped forward, visibly shaken. Admiral Tanaka, he demanded, what is the meaning of this? Tanaka stared at him calmly. You know exactly what this is. Humanity has launched an unprovoked military assault against a Concord member species. Tanaka interrupted him instantly. Unprovoked. The word itself felt dangerous. Her voice remained perfectly calm. 1 year ago, the Dravari Dominion exterminated 14 million human civilians live before the galaxy. Silence spread through the chamber. No one interrupted her now. You watched. Another silence. You did nothing. Several representatives lowered their eyes. Others looked angry, afraid. Tanaka continued. So today humanity gives its response. Chancellor Mervyn's expression hardened. This attack violates every law of interstellar conflict. No, Tanaka replied softly. Haven Reach did. The chamber fell silent again. Then Representative Zoreth of the Dravari Collective appeared on one side of the projection, his expression twisted with outrage. You cannot threaten the balance of galactic civilization over one colony. Tanaka slowly turned her eyes toward him, and suddenly the entire bridge felt colder. One colony? Her voice barely rose above a whisper. 14 million human beings. Zoreth opened his mouth again. Tanaka cut him off. You laughed while our children burned. The Dravari representative froze. Because it was true. The entire galaxy remembered those broadcasts now. The cheering, the mockery, the entertainment. Tanaka stepped closer to the transmission. Every species in the Concord chamber could see her eyes now. Not rage, not grief. Something worse. Certainty. This is not retaliation anymore, she said quietly. This is instruction. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Tanaka's voice became almost gentle. The galaxy taught humanity that mercy is weakness. Another Dominion battle station exploded behind her through the bridge windows. So now humanity will teach the galaxy fear. Then she ended the transmission. Back on Drakkar Prime, Commander Verith watched the orbital feeds collapse one after another in disbelief. Entire Dominion fleets were dying. Entire defense systems erased within hours. How? He whispered. One of his officers looked physically sick. The humans spent a year preparing. No species mobilizes as quickly. Another officer turned slowly toward him. Maybe they were never weak. That sentence hit harder than the explosions outside, because suddenly, Verith understood. Humanity had not been broken by Haven Reach. Humanity had been transformed by it, and now the thing they awakened had arrived. The war lasted 12 days before the galaxy panicked. By then, the Dravari Dominion had already lost 17 worlds. Not contested, not occupied, erased. Human fleets moved through Dominion territory like a plague of black fire, striking military installations, orbital shipyards, communication nexuses, and planetary defense systems with terrifying precision. Entire sectors vanished from galactic maps within hours. Every Dominion attempt to regroup ended the same way: total destruction. And the most horrifying part? Humanity never slowed down. No negotiations, no demands, no surrender conditions, only annihilation. Across civilized space, emergency broadcasts interrupted every major communication network. News channels showed endless footage of burning Dravari worlds, while terrified analysts struggled to explain what was happening. Nobody had believed humanity capable of this. Nobody. The species once mocked as emotional newcomers now fielded the most terrifying military force the galaxy had ever seen. And worse, the humans were winning effortlessly. Inside the Grand Concord chamber, chaos consumed the assembly completely. Representatives shouted over one another, while tactical projections updated continuously above the central platform. Dominion fleet lost, Kether system. Dravari home defense collapsing. Human fleet movement untraceable. Planetary casualties exceeding expectations. The casualty counter climbed so rapidly that several species stopped displaying it entirely. Chancellor Merivin slammed both hands against the central platform. Silence. The chamber quieted reluctantly. The elderly Talvex leader looked exhausted now, older than anyone had ever seen him. "We are witnessing civilization collapse in real time," he warned sharply. "If humanity destroys the Dominion completely, every major power in this galaxy becomes vulnerable." Representative Zorith snarled, "Immediately," then stopped them. "How?" Another delegate shouted back. That question silenced the room again, because no one had an answer. Every Concord intervention fleet sent toward Dominion territory had retreated almost immediately after encountering human warships. Entire commanders returned visibly shaken, describing human fleets that appeared from nowhere, struck without hesitation, and vanished before counterattack became possible. Worse still, humanity had begun broadcasting. Every assault, every destroyed fleet, every burning world. Across the galaxy, trillions watched the humans advance through Dominion space, while the same message repeated endlessly across every conquered system. This is what happens when you kill human children. The broadcasts were cold, emotionless, certain. That certainty terrified the galaxy more than the violence itself. Representative Solvex spoke quietly. "They are not fighting like a species seeking victory." "No," Chancellor Merivin agreed grimly. "They are fighting like a species delivering punishment." A military advisor rushed into the chamber suddenly. "Chancellor." "What now?" The advisor activated an emergency tactical projection above the assembly. The room froze instantly. 4,000 human warships had appeared at the edge of Concord-controlled space. The Black Fleet, entire species, went silent. Even the hologram itself felt oppressive. Rows upon rows of black warships floated motionless in perfect formation like executioners waiting outside a prison gate. Representative Zorith stood abruptly. "They're threatening the Concord." "No," Chancellor Merivin whispered. "They're warning us." The emergency communications network activated instantly. A transmission request. Human origin. Nobody in the chamber spoke as Chancellor Merivin accepted it. Admiral Naomi Tanaka appeared above the assembly. The chamber felt colder immediately. She looked exhausted, but terrifyingly calm. Behind her, the stars of burning Dominion space glowed through the bridge windows of the Remembrance. "Admiral Tanaka," Merivin began carefully, "the Concord demands an immediate ceasefire." "No." The answer came instantly. Several representatives erupted angrily. You cannot exterminate an entire civilization. You're destabilizing the galaxy. This madness must stop. Tanaka listened without expression. Then finally she spoke. 1 year ago, 14 million humans begged for mercy. Silence. You watched them die. No one answered. Representative Zoreth tried anyway. The Dominion's actions do not justify genocide. Tanaka turned toward him slowly, and suddenly Zoreth stopped speaking, because there was something deeply wrong in her eyes now. Not insanity, not hatred, absence. Like grief had hollowed out everything human inside her and left only purpose behind. You celebrated Haven Reach, she said quietly. Zoreth visibly stiffened. The Dravari Collective officially praised a massacre as a necessary correction against human expansion. Nobody moved. Tanaka stepped closer toward the transmission. Do you know what 14 million deaths sound like? The chamber remained silent. I do. Her voice never rose. I listened to children scream while they burned alive. Several representatives looked away. Tanaka continued calmly. The galaxy taught humanity a lesson that day. Another silence. That law means nothing. That mercy means weakness. That civilization is just fear wearing expensive clothing. Behind her, another Dominion world disappeared beneath orbital fire. The explosion illuminated her face briefly in red light. So now we are teaching the galaxy something in return. Chancellor Merivin spoke carefully. And what exactly is that? For the first time since the transmission began, Tanaka smiled. It was the most frightening thing anyone in the chamber had ever seen. That humanity is the last mistake you will ever make. The transmission ended. Absolute silence filled the Concord chamber. No one spoke for several seconds. Then, quietly, almost in disbelief, Representative Solvek whispered, "They're not afraid of us anymore." Chancellor Merivin stared at the dark transmission field. "No," he said softly. And for the first time in galactic history, the Concord realized something horrifying. Humanity no longer wanted acceptance among the stars. Humanity wanted fear. Meanwhile, deep inside Dominion territory, Commander Vera stood in the ruins of the Imperial War Nexus, watching another sector collapse across tactical displays. Everything was gone. Fleets, defense grids, entire worlds. The humans advanced everywhere simultaneously, impossible to predict and impossible to stop. One of his officers approached carefully. "Commander, the outer colonies are surrendering." Vareth laughed weakly. Surrender? His eyes drifted toward the casualty reports. The humans did not accept surrender. Everyone knew that now. The officer lowered his voice. Civilian evacuation requests are overwhelming planetary channels. For a long moment, Vera said nothing. Then, quietly, "Do you know what the worst part is?" The officer hesitated. "What?" Vera stared at the burning holographic map of his collapsing empire. "We created this." Outside the shattered war complex, Dominion cities burned beneath human orbital fire, while millions fled through collapsing streets. And across the galaxy, every species watched in absolute terror, because the lesson was finally becoming clear. Humanity had not survived Haven Reach. Something else had survived in humanity's place. By the 4th month of the war, the Dravari Dominion no longer existed as a functioning civilization. Its outer colonies were silent. Its fleets were gone. Its trade routes had collapsed into drifting graveyards of burned metal and frozen bodies. Entire worlds starved beneath orbital blockades, while human warships hunted every remaining military vessel across the sector without rest or mercy. Still, the humans kept coming. That was what finally broke the Dominion psychologically. Not the destruction, not even the deaths, the certainty. Humanity never slowed, never celebrated, never demanded surrender. They advanced with the cold inevitability of extinction itself. Now only one world remained, Drakkar Prime, the Dominion home world. 22 billion civilians crowded beneath planetary shields, while the remnants of the imperial government collapsed into panic and infighting. Refugee camps stretched across entire continents. Food riots erupted daily inside major cities. Hospitals overflowed with wounded while orbital bombardments lit the skies every night like artificial sunsets. And above the dying world, the Black Fleet waited, for 1,000 human warships surrounded the planet in complete silence. No broadcasts, no warnings, only darkness. Inside the shattered Imperial Palace bunker, Commander Vareth stared hollow-eyed at the tactical displays surrounding him. Every screen showed the same thing. Human ships, human fleets, human soldiers landing across planetary sectors. The invasion had begun. One of his remaining generals spoke carefully. Eastern defense lines collapsed 3 hours ago. Human ground forces are advancing toward the capital districts. Another officer interrupted. Orbital Shield Grid 7 just failed. Then another voice. We've lost contact with Northern Command. Every report sounded identical now. Collapse, retreat, death. Vareth looked older than he had only months earlier. His scales had dulled from stress and exhaustion, while deep shadows rested beneath his eyes. How many civilians remain inside evacuation sectors? The answer came softly. Approximately 11 billion. Silence. Then Vareth whispered something none of his officers ever expected to hear. We should have killed them quietly. No one responded, because everyone in that room knew he was right. Haven Reach had not simply enraged humanity. It had humiliated them before the entire galaxy. And now humanity intended to make sure the galaxy never forgot the price of that humiliation. Outside the bunker, Drakkar Prime burned. Human drop fleets descended through the atmosphere continuously, while orbital strikes shattered defensive positions ahead of advancing ground divisions. Entire city districts vanished beneath rail bombardments as Revenant soldiers pushed deeper into the capital sectors without pause. And everywhere they went, the broadcast followed. The massacre of Haven Reach played endlessly across Concord Dominion networks. Children running through fire. Families executed publicly. Commander Vareth laughing beside burning schools. The message beneath the footage never changed. This is why you die. Lieutenant Adrian Vale moved through the shattered streets of the capital alongside his Revenant squad, while ash drifted through the air like gray snow. He was 24 years old. Before Haven Reach, he had studied architecture. Now he carried a pulse rifle across his chest while stepping over bodies in streets lined with burning buildings. His entire family had died in Sector 12 during the massacre. His mother, his younger brother, his fiancé, gone. Ahead of him, another squad breached a residential tower, while civilians screamed somewhere deeper inside the structure. One of Adrian's soldiers looked toward him. Movement on the 4th floor. Adrian nodded once. Clear it. No hesitation. No emotion. The squad advanced upward through smoke-filled corridors lit only by emergency red lighting. Bodies covered the stairwells, some Dravari soldiers, many civilians. The smell of blood and burning metal clung to everything now. At the top level, Adrian kicked open a damaged apartment door. Inside, a Dravari family huddled together against the far wall. 2 adults, 3 children. Terrified, the father stepped protectively in front of them, immediately despite visibly shaking. Please, he whispered through broken translator software. Please. Adrian raised his rifle automatically. One of the children began crying, and suddenly, for just 1 second, he saw Sophia Reyes. The little girl from the Haven Reach broadcast clutching her mother, while Dravari soldiers raised rifles toward them. Adrian's finger tightened on the trigger. The Dravari father fell to his knees desperately. They are children. Silence filled the ruined apartment. Then one of Adrian's squad members spoke coldly beside him. They said the same thing on Haven Reach. The room became still. Adrian stared at the terrified children for several more seconds, then slowly lowered his weapon, moved them to processing. The soldier beside him stiffened. Lieutenant, that's an order. Several squad members exchanged uncertain looks, but obeyed. As the terrified family was escorted away, Adrian remained motionless inside the apartment, because for the first time since the war began, something inside him hurt again. Not rage, not hatred, humanity, and that frightened him more than battle ever had. Far above the invasion zones, Admiral Naomi Tanaka stood alone aboard the Remembrance, watching Drakkar Prime burn beneath orbital fire. General Hale approached quietly behind her. We captured Commander Veritha's location. Tanaka did not turn around. Alive? Yes. Another silence. Then Hale spoke carefully. Naomi, we've won. Still no response. The Dominion is finished. Tanaka finally looked down toward the burning planet below. No, she said softly. Not yet. General Hale hesitated. The fleet is requesting authorization for final deployment. The words hung heavily between them. Final deployment. Project Shadow. The extinction weapon. Billions would die within days once released. Even now, after everything, part of Hale hoped she would refuse. Instead, Tanaka asked quietly, how many human children died at Haven Reach? Hale closed his eyes briefly. 3.2 million. Silence. Then Tanaka whispered, authorized deployment preparation. General Hale looked physically sick, but he saluted anyway. Yes, Admiral. After he left, Tanaka remained alone before the massive observation window. Below her, entire continents burned beneath the invasion, and somewhere deep beneath the destruction, she could still hear children screaming across old broadcast recordings burned permanently into her memory. For the first time in her life, Naomi Tanaka wondered whether humanity deserved to survive what it had become. The final extinction began at dawn. Across the ruined surface of Drakkar Prime, billions of Dravari civilians awoke beneath darkened skies filled with black human warships hanging silently in orbit like gods of death. Entire cities had already collapsed into famine, disease, and panic. Fires still burned across continents shattered by months of war, while refugee columns stretched endlessly through destroyed highways and frozen wastelands. And above them all, the Black Fleet waited. At exactly 0600 Galactic Standard Time, every surviving communication network in civilized space activated simultaneously. Every screen, every station, every ship, every world. The galaxy stopped breathing as Admiral Naomi Tanaka appeared once more before the stars. She looked older now, not physically, spiritually, like the war itself had hollowed her into something colder than exhaustion. Behind her floated the burning image of Drakkar Prime. This transmission is directed to every species in known space, she said calmly. No anger, no hatred, that frightened the galaxy more than rage ever could. 1 year ago, the Dravari Dominion exterminated 14 million human civilians on Haven Reach. Images from the massacre appeared across the transmission. Burning schools, dead families, children crying in smoke-filled streets. The galaxy watched in horrified silence. You watched it happen, Tanaka continued quietly. Some of you did nothing. Another image appeared. Concord representatives during the original debates. Silent. Passive, cowardly. Some of you celebrated. Now came footage of alien broadcasts mocking human suffering after Haven Reach. Laughter, approval, entertainment. The galaxy could not look away. Tanaka's eyes never changed. You taught humanity a lesson that day. Behind her, human warships slowly repositioned above Drakkar Prime in perfect formation. You taught us that mercy has no value in a civilization ruled by fear. The camera widened slightly, and for the first time, the galaxy saw the shadow platforms, massive black orbital devices, suspended between the human fleets like floating tombs. Even the Concord military analysts froze in horror, because they immediately understood these were not ordinary weapons. Tanaka continued speaking softly. So now humanity gives the galaxy a lesson in return. Inside the Grand Concord chamber, Chancellor Mervyn stared at the transmission with visible dread. No, he whispered. The tactical advisors around him looked terrified. One finally spoke. If those platforms are what we think they are... He could not finish the sentence, because everyone already knew. Tanaka looked directly into the camera. This is the cost of killing human children. Then she gave the order. Deploy Shadow. Across orbit, the extinction platforms activated. The skies above Drakkar Prime turned black, not metaphorically, literally. Massive gravitational distortion spread across the upper atmosphere, while oceans began pulling violently toward the heavens. Entire cities collapsed as the planet itself started tearing apart beneath impossible pressure. The galaxy watched in horror. Continents cracked open. Storm systems ignited. Mountains shattered. Billions screamed across emergency channels as Drakkar Prime began dying in real time. Inside the ruined Imperial Palace bunker, Commander Vareth felt his knees as the planet trembled around him. "No," he whispered weakly. Above him, ceilings split apart while alarms screamed endlessly through collapsing corridors. One of his officers cried openly now, "They're destroying the planet." Vareth closed his eyes, and suddenly he remembered Haven Reach. The children, the broadcasts, his own laughter, human civilians begging while he smiled for cameras. For the first time since the war began, he truly understood what humanity had become. Not soldiers, not conquerors, not even monsters. A warning. The planet shook violently again. The bunker lights died. And Commander Vareth finally whispered the words that came far too late. "We deserve this." Above Drakkar Prime, Admiral Tanaka watched the extinction unfold in complete silence. General Hale stood nearby, pale and shaken. Civilian casualty estimates are exceeding all projections. Tanaka did not respond. The planet below them continued collapsing. 11 billion lives ending beneath blackened skies. Human officers across the bridge looked disturbed now, some openly horrified, because despite everything, this was still genocide. And deep down, every human understood it. Lieutenant Adrian Vale stood inside one of the invasion carriers watching destruction through reinforced glass. Entire continents were disappearing beneath oceans of fire. Behind him, another soldier whispered shakily, "My God!" Adrian said nothing, because all he could think about was the terrified Dravari children inside that apartment, and Sophia Reyes, and the children of Haven Reach. And suddenly the lines between justice and horror no longer felt clear anymore. Across civilized space, trillions watched in absolute terror as the Dravari homeworld died. No species celebrated now. No one laughed, because everyone understood the truth. Humanity had crossed a line no civilization had ever crossed before, and they had done it deliberately. Hours later, Drakkar Prime finally broke apart. The planet collapsed inward beneath catastrophic gravitational failure, before erupting into a burning debris field visible across the sector. The Dravari Dominion ceased to exist. Just like that, 30 billion lives. Gone. Silence spread across the galaxy, a silence deeper than fear, because every species understood what they had witnessed. Humanity had not merely defeated an enemy. Humanity had made extinction into a message. Several hours later, Admiral Tanaka transmitted one final broadcast to the galaxy. No dramatic music, no triumph, only silence and stars behind her. "Haven Reach is avenged," she said quietly. Her voice sounded tired now, ancient, but let the galaxy remember what happened here. She paused. Humanity did not begin this war. Another silence, but humanity finished it. Behind her floated the shattered remains of Drakkar Prime, a dead civilization drifting through darkness. Tanaka looked directly into the camera one last time. "You wanted humanity to learn fear." Her eyes hardened slightly. Instead, the galaxy held its breath. Humanity taught fear to the galaxy. Transmission ended. For a very long time afterward, no species spoke. No fleets moved. No governments issued threats against humanity again, because the lesson of Haven Reach had become carved permanently into galactic history. If you kill humans, they may forgive. If you humiliate humans, they may endure. But if you make humanity watch its children burn, the stars themselves will remember your extinction.